Defense News is proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, more coverage from the Air and Space Forces Association's annual Air, Space, and Cyber Conference. We take a look at developing heavy-lift drone technology. The Air Force wants to carry everything from ammo to wounded troops through hostile territory. Have a look. And from the Chief of Space Force Operations discusses some of the service's upcoming milestones. Hear what he has to say about the force's priorities. Plus, we head to the National Museum of the Marine Corps to check out some new and upcoming exhibits. See what the museum has on tap. Also, a first look at the hardware used to check America's most advanced warplanes for nicks and flaws after missions. Come meet the Razor. It's the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Diana Stancy. The military envisions a near future where drones take over the dangerous and sometimes tedious work of delivering supplies to and from the battlefield. At this year's Air, Space, and Cyber Conference in National Harbor, Maryland, we took a look at a system being developed to perform this work. Innovative unmanned tech that utilizes everything from plywood materials to magnetic linkages. First up, we stopped by the Air Force Research Laboratory's booth on the exhibition floor to check out the Grasshopper, a one-way drone meant to bring all kinds of supplies to troops in the field.
So Grasshopper is a large payload, autonomous, contested logistics delivery vehicle. It is air-launched, and it is single-use, and it's very low cost. So the Air Force is very interested in delivering operationally relevant amounts of payload at some standoff distances from our host aircraft. So we want to basically deliver pallets, but not immediately underneath where the host aircraft is. So Grasshopper solves that need by giving us standoff. We've got about a 10-to-1 glide ratio. So as soon as it leaves the host aircraft, it autonomously navigates to its target and then lands under parachute, gives us 500 pounds of payload. Yeah, so Grasshopper's large. 500 pounds is a lot of weight. And we want to make sure we give that payload volume so you can deliver those bulky or those really non-dense payloads. So MREs is a good example of something that's not very dense, but you'd want to deliver a lot of them. So as a very large airframe, it's single use, but we've worked really hard to keep its costs down. So it's using some standard aerospace technologies, a lot of plywood, a lot of vacuum-formed plastic too. So we don't really care what you want to put inside of it. It's got a pretty significant volume, so there are a number of payloads that are volume limited, so MREs, but for the most part, if you can fit it in there, it's under 500 pounds, it'll fly. So Grasshopper's got a pretty long history. It went by a number of names previously, and there were a number of efforts that kind of led to this current design. Right now, Grasshopper is operationally fielded, so very high tech readiness level, and we have customers going directly to our manufacturer and buying them. So it's air-launched. We can't talk about which host aircraft it's launched from, but it's always air-launched. So it's fully autonomous, so give it some waypoints, and as it releases from its host aircraft, it navigates to those waypoints, and when it gets to the target, it'll loiter and then pop its parachute. So the entire airframe's parachuted. It's got a little crush attenuating nose on the front, so that helps us reduce some of the shock loading when it hits the ground. Yeah, so if we had a unit that's downrange, maybe they are in an area that we can't drop directly over them, we'd use Grasshopper, so we'd load it up on the ground with food, ammunition, radios, whatever they need. And then in the air, we can program it. And then as soon as it's released from its host aircraft, its wings will deploy, and it'll navigate, miles and miles to its target. And then once it's over that target, parachute will pop out. The entire thing drops to the ground. And then the front of the vehicle's got this crush attenuating nose. So when it hits the ground, that'll crush, keeps that shock loading low. And then crew on the ground can pull up to 500 pounds of that payload out. So AFRL's rule, we're looking at two main efforts based on this kind of baseline Grasshopper. So the first effort, we want to extend its range, so we're going to power this system. We want to get out to about 500 miles. And then the second effort, we're very concerned with being able to navigate in a GPS-denied environment. So there are a number of ways you can do that, and we're looking at all sorts of different possibilities.
AFA's 2024 conference was the forum for discussion on a range of top-line topics for leaders of the Air and Space Forces. One point on the minds of many in attendance: the progression and advancement of the Space Force, a subject that Chief of Space Force Operations General Chance Saltzman focused in on during his keynote speech. Defense News space and emerging technology reporter Courtney Albon was on site to provide a recap and analysis of Saltzman's remarks.
Chief of Space Operations General Chance Saltzman gave the keynote here this morning. He reflected back a bit on the Space Force's first 5 years and then talked about some upcoming milestones for the service. That includes creating a greater presence in the combatant commands, implementing a new force generation model, and standing up a new command called Space Futures Command.
At the 2024 Warfare Symposium in February, I announced our intention to stand up a new institutional field command dedicated to force design. Space Futures Command will be responsible for ensuring our long-term technical advantage in space. Our plan is for Futures Command to incorporate 3 centers, working in tandem to forecast the future operating environment, define our service's operational concepts, and ultimately document the objective force, the force we need for future success.
General Saltzman said the command should be up and running by the end of this year or early next year, and the timing is somewhat dependent on the outcome of mission analysis that the service is running now. The Space Force has established a task force that's running tabletop exercises and crafting a plan for the future of the command.
What we're talking about here is nothing less than re-baselining the way we identify, mature, and develop concepts that will shape the service for years to come. This is critical because there's so many things that we need to get right. So how do we take in new ideas? How do we test them? How do we align them with the art of the possible? Then resource them according to the science of the practical. Just last month, Task Force Futures completed a tabletop exercise to start answering these questions and more. Form must follow function, and the lessons we're learning will be built into our foundation from the outset, ensuring the robust force design is integrated into every aspect of a Space Force by design.
Following his speech, General Saltzman spoke with reporters here at the conference. He elaborated a bit on some of these topics and gave a sense of the Space Force's funding needs. He couldn't talk much about the upcoming 2026 budget, but he said the service's top priorities are counterspace and space domain awareness.
Yeah, this is back to our transformational discussion, and the analogy that I've thrown around is this conversion from a merchant marine to U.S. Navy. And one of the kind of corollaries to that analogy is a perfectly modernized merchant marine is still not a U.S. Navy. And so when we say, this is to the question here, it's not just about making us better in the way we used to do business. There are new missions. The counter space mission to overcome the space-enabled targeting that our adversaries have put in place is kind of new mission. It's the key aspect of space superiority. New mission requires new resources, new funding. And so I don't have a good answer for what those sources are, but we've got $800 billion plus, and we're going to have to make the decisions about where we need to invest to make sure we can do all the missions effectively. Priorities that we have submitted, we're still early in the deliberation process, are counterspace capabilities and the space domain awareness that underpins it. We have to understand what's going on in the domain to effectively employ counterspace capability.
When we return, a trip to the National Museum of the Marine Corps to see new exhibits the facility will soon bring to the public. Don't go away. Welcome back. The National Museum of the Marine Corps has been a repository for the history of the Corps since its opening in 2006. This October, it will open 2 new galleries with 20,000 square feet of exhibition space, focusing on marine operations from the Cold War to the present day. We got a sneak preview of what's coming to the museum in a special tour recently and came back with this report.
We're here at the National Museum of the Marine Corps just a few weeks ahead of the October opening of new galleries, 20,000 square feet that cover the 1970s all the way up to 2021 and everything in between, from Iraq and Afghanistan to Grenada, Beirut, and many other operations that many may not be aware of. A lot of personal objects here, hundreds of different artifacts, a very interesting period of time for the Marine Corps and very recent history for those involved. So, Mr. Gentry, we're here at the National Museum of the Marine Corps, and we've got some new galleries opened up covering some very interesting time periods in the Marine Corps history. Could you please just walk us through just the kind of what's been going on here and kind of what we're going to be looking at soon?
So, well, I'll start back on 6 November 2006 when we first opened up on the Marine Corps birthday. And that, in the later phase, we were able to tell the story through Vietnam. These galleries pick up the story after Vietnam, so 1976 really through 2021. First gallery talks about peacekeepers in Beirut, Grenada, Desert Storm, and then the myriad of operations that occurred during that time, because the Marine Corps was really busy during that period. And then as you transition from 9/11 to this gallery, here we talk about Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yeah. Good. And I understand there's some very personal items here. We have actual artifacts from individual Marines and also Marines who served maybe as models for some of the statues we see here. Could you talk a little bit about that?
So every artifact tells a story, otherwise it wouldn't be in here. And then every set of dress blues in these two galleries represents or came from a family of a Marine that was killed in action. All the adult figures here in the museum, we call them cast figures, because they're, no kidding, live cast. So we oil them up, and it's about a 4-hour process. They get in whatever their action pose is. They make 4 different molds. We send it off to really the artists, and they pour the molds, and then they create the sheen of sweat, grime, tattoo in one case. So we really try to bring realism to every aspect of the museum.
In addition to that, I think there's some interesting little kind of very specific details to, there's some smells and sounds and things. Could you talk a little about how that was created?
Okay, so in the rest of the museum, we really evoke emotion through sight and sound. Now we're going to add the sense of smell. So we have a scent cannon at the beginning of our Iraqi village that's going to pump out a scent that will be reminiscent to many who deployed over there. So it'll be a mixture of, right now, feces, burning garbage, particularly some plastic, a little bit of cordite, stuff like that.
Now, you have Marines of all generations that come to visit this museum. As director, what are you hoping to share with them through these new galleries and the existing ones whenever they served, whether it was back in the 50s or 60s in this period, or even future Marines serving now who may come to this years from now?
So what we really want to do is honor that selfless service of those Marines that served in the past. We want to reinvigorate the spirit of today's Marines, because there's a time when people get a little, you get drugged down a little bit. We want them to be, remotivated. And then we really want to inspire the next generation of Marines, those young men and women that come to visit.
So, Mr. McGrath, I understand that you are actually very personally connected to the display we're looking at right now. Could you tell us a little bit about your point of view, what happened this day, and what we're looking at?
Sure. So this is an MATV vehicle. So at this time I was deployed with Marine Special Operations Command in Helmand Province. We were running a village stability platform support mission, and we struck an IED. As a result, my turret gunner was ejected from the vehicle. This is a mobility kill, so the vehicle was completely incapacitated, but everyone in the vehicle survived. We executed a medevac for my turret gunner, recovered this vehicle on a flat rack, and kept pushing with the mission.
I can imagine kind of seeing something like this, may bring up some personal thoughts, memories. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. Seeing the exhibit or seeing the vehicle for the first time obviously invokes some emotion. While it was a good day, all of us survived. Being exposed to an IED is difficult. To me, it was an audible pop in both ears. I remember it being an audible pop, and then there's smoke everywhere. And honestly, my first thought is, this is going to be hard on my kids. I knew immediately it was an IED, and I knew it was bad. When I started to come to a little bit and open the door and get out, though the exhibit's great, you don't see burning oil pouring from underneath the vehicle. You don't see the moon dust from the vehicle stopping and the mine rollers. You don't see the smoke from the IED deploying. You don't see the pieces and parts everywhere. So really a confusing environment, limited visibility. No one can hear because you've just had both of your eardrums ruptured. Everyone has a nosebleed. What I hope that people see when they see this, and typically it's, wow, that's a huge vehicle and this was a crazy day, but the violence of action that happens in a combat environment is not easily replicated. And I think, one of my favorite sayings is, for those who have fought for it, freedom has the flavor the protected will never know. For individuals who have been through this, they can come here and see it and nod their head and say, yeah, I understand this exactly, but I also know what it smells like, what it feels like. They understand the hugs that happen after this, the, oh my God, we're alive hugs. But really what has impressed me about this day when I think back about it is that Marines never missed a beat.
So, Mr. Vickers, I understand we're here with some new gallery openings that cover a 50-year period, a lot of which predates 9/11, maybe more than half. Can you talk to us a little bit about what the significance of the pre-9/11 aspects of these galleries are?
Sure, absolutely. So the other part of the museum covers up to Vietnam. So this gallery picks up in what we're calling Gallery 13, the Cold War, post-Vietnam all the way up to 9/11. So there's a lot of Marine Corps history in there that folks really don't know a whole lot about. And some of these battles, even though they were fairly large, they were also very short, maybe only 3 or 4 days. For example, the ground war in the first Gulf War was about 4 days.
Now, I know a lot of people may know some of the more recent history of Marine Corps operations. As someone who served during this period and specifically served in these conflicts, what do you hope future Marines of this generation and moving forward, draw from these exhibits or learn from them or take home with them?
That's a really good question, and it could be a very long answer. But we in the museum want to feature all generations of Marines, no matter how long they served. So some of the Marines featured in this gallery, yes, they may not have been part of Iraq and Afghanistan, but they raised their hand just like other Marines do. And they served in some of these conflicts, Grenada, and here in Desert Shield and Desert Storm. But not just in conflicts, but also a lot of peacekeeping type missions. I mean, right around the corner we feature Haiti, and we talk about the humanitarian aspect of Marines. And that was one thing that I think in the earlier part of our museum we had been missing a little bit, so we made a concentrated effort to go, you know what, Marines, just like General Mattis said, they're no better friend, no worse enemy. And that's who we are as Marines.
When we come back, our personal finance expert Jeanette Mack is back with tips to help you manage your hard-earned cash. Welcome back. On this episode of Money Minute, you know what a credit card is, but do you know what a secured credit card is? Jeanette Mack from Navy Federal Credit Union is here to explain.
Deployment, PCFs moves, and everyday expenses can make managing finances complicated, especially when it comes to building credit. Military families already have a ton on their plate, but what if there was a way to build strong credit while making everyday purchases? A secured card can do that. It works almost like a traditional credit card, but they're designed specifically for those who want to build or rebuild their credit. How it works is you make an initial deposit that sets your credit limit. Don't worry, it's totally refundable. But you need those funds in place to act as the security backing your purchases. Then you use the card responsibly for everyday purchases like groceries or gas, and your on-time payments are reported to credit bureaus, helping you build a positive credit history. When choosing a secured card, look for one that doesn't have annual fees and gets reward points for travel, cashback, or merchandise. Plus, once you establish good repayment habits, you could earn an upgrade to a regular credit card with a higher spending limit. You deserve all the benefits good credit can bring. Build credit the smart way with a secured card, and you'll be on your way to financial success.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next week. To get more coverage of military and defense topics, send up your own personal spy balloon to look down on militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more headlines. And to be the most informed paratrooper jumping out of a perfectly good airplane, sign up for our early bird brief, compiled each morning to bring you the most recent headlines. Lastly, if social media is where you collect open source intelligence, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. And just like most junior troops, we're on TikTok, so go find us there as well. After the break, the surprising tech that scans America's most advanced jets for flaws when they land. How do you check a stealth bomber for nicks and scratches that could harm its performance? Find out when we return. Welcome back. This year's Air, Space, and Cyber Conference in National Harbor, Maryland displayed an array of aircraft and other systems designed to take a fight to the U.S.'s adversaries. But potentially just as important as the systems in the air are the ones on the ground conducting maintenance inspections and spotting flaws after missions. On the floor at AFA, we spoke to the CEO of Resonant Sciences about the Razor, a product being used to scour American aircraft after missions to spot any blemishes incurred during flights that may compromise stealth capabilities. Have a look.
I'm Micah North. I'm the CEO at Resonant Sciences, and the focus of the company is on survivability. So we do a lot of different things for measuring the signatures of aircraft and signatures of platforms, as well as doing all sorts of different technologies to enhance survivability, be it from radomes to electronics to radar systems, kind of runs the full gamut. So this is the Resonant Adaptable Zonal Radar. We call it the RAZOR system. So what the RAZOR does is it measures the signature of the aircraft, or the radar cross-section of the aircraft. So what we always want to know is, what does our platform look like relative to a threat system? So we want to emulate a threat and see how our aircraft performs relative to that threat. And that's basically essentially what the RAZOR system does. It's used in a couple different ways. It's used, one, for development purposes. It's also used for production acceptance. And then other groups use it for maintenance. So after they've done performance on like a leading edge or fixed a part of the aircraft, come back and remeasure the aircraft to verify that the signature is back to what it was, what it's supposed to be. So the wheels were designed to be able to move the RAZOR in any position. Oftentimes when you're inside of a hangar, there's not a lot of space with the jet and the RAZOR in there. So we want to be able to position it and move all over the place with it. And so this will actually work as almost like a zero turn system. So you can actually rotate it around almost like a tank was how it works. The arm here will actually help for fine control. And so we can use this pretty well to get the RAZOR and the array into position. So the system has, on the front of it, it's a 2 to 18 gigahertz array powered by the radar. So the radar and synthesizer are here on the sides. And on top, we have multiple sensors up there for knowing where we are positionally relative to the aircraft. So we want to make sure, A, we want to make sure we never hit the aircraft, but B, we want to have repeatable measurements. So we want to be able to make these measurements in the same place over and over and over again. And we actually have another software package that we provide with the system that you can go in and actually watch the performance of your vehicle over time. So we measure components by serial number, part number, tail number, all the way out, and then compile all that over time. And so you can start to see trends and where you're having issues with the aircraft, or things that are popping up, new problems that are starting to happen, or materials that may be failing, or defects that occur in the system. We're constantly looking at expanding the system, making it more autonomous. It's fairly autonomous right now, but it's more of pulling in the data, taking the big data analytics, which is something that we're looking at. So it is back to the AI. And so what do you do with the data? Now we've got all this data, and why do we turn that into something actionable? And those are the next steps and the next things that we're working with the system on. And the whole idea is to keep aircraft mission capable. You know, the guys in the field want to know, can we go fly? Is the signature good? Can we do that? So that's the whole point of RAZOR, is to keep aircraft in the air.
Well, that's all we have time for in this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.